Today, I'm going to be picking an 11 of the most underrated players to watch in the Premier League this season in partnership with EA Sports FC25. I really want to focus on the players behind the ratings, those that don't get the plaudits but are vital to their teams. Let's start with the goalkeeper because this was a really difficult one. There was a few good options here. I was very tempted to pick Bernd Leno. He's obviously had an amazing couple of years at Fulham since that move to Arsenal. They're kind of collecting ex-Arsenal players, aren't they? Reece Nelson, Emile Smith-Rowe, Alex Iwobi. Bernd Leno's shot stopping has bailed them out time and time again. I was also tempted by Bart Verbruggen. He's had an amazing time at Brighton, but still splits the minutes to a level with Steele, doesn't he? So instead, I wanted to look forward to a goalkeeper that's had a great start to the season, and I think is going to have a big impact on his team under Ollie Glasner, and that's Dean Henderson. Now, he's only rated as a 79 on FC25, and I think that's probably partly down to the fact last season he had a couple of injuries. He was splitting minutes with Sam Johnson. Well, now Sam Johnson has moved on. He's gone to Wolves. Dean Henderson is the number one there. And rightly so, to be honest with you. He's in the top 10% of goalkeepers for post-shot XG. He's an absolute leader of the back line. And I think he's out to prove Manchester United wrong this season. Obviously, they opted to move him on. They went with Andre Onana in the sticks instead, who's an amazing goalkeeper in his own right. But Dean Henderson's career sort of took a little dip, and I feel like it's definitely back on the climb now. That England jersey, yes, Jordan Pickford is the out-and-out undisputed number one right now, but in some mythical world, let's say Everton got relegated, and he had to play a season in the Championship before that 2026 World Cup. Could somehow Dean Henderson come to the fore? You never know. And with performances like we saw against Chelsea, where he made 6 saves with that excellent distribution, huge chances being stopped as well, that last-minute effort from Nicholas Jackson where he got down low was exceptional. I think Dean Henderson could have a little remontada this season. He's flying under the radar as one of the league's better goalkeepers. Right back, I think, is a really tough spot because there's just so many elite right backs in the league right now. Obviously, Trent Alexander-Arnold. You think as well of Pedro Porro, Ben White. The list is so long. But I'm going to focus on a player who has started the season on fire. He's ousted Kyle Walker from the team already. It's Rico Lewis. Now, Walker put up 30 Premier League starts last season, and Rico Lewis's minutes were less than I think he was hoping for. So because of that, he's been handed a 76 rating, and as you can see, I feel like his stats are on the low side because it's quite hard to judge Rico Lewis's all-round game. We've heard Pep Guardiola talk about his lack of height being a problem, but on the ball, his tenacity to get into defensive position, his ability to invert and play alongside a defensive midfielder, be that Kovacic or be that Rodri, is absolutely astonishing for his age. He's in the top 3% of European fullbacks for touches and progressive passes. Now, those numbers are juiced a little bit because he kind of plays in those midfield areas. That's why he's got a 92% pass accuracy. But that technical ability means that City can play a certain way. He is vital to how Man City develop their play from the back. He's also vital to how they defend when he tucks inside. Overall, Rico Lewis is going to have a huge season. It wouldn't be a massive surprise to see him pushing Trent for a starting spot for England in the right-back role. Maybe even starting as a left-back. He's that versatile. I still think he's underrated. Okay, our first centre-back. There were a lot of names in my mind here. I was very tempted to go for Zabarnyi at Bournemouth, maybe even Senesi. I also liked Akanji for this role. Still think he's underrated despite the fact he is a treble winner. But instead, I'm going for Jean-Paul van Hecke at Brighton. As you can see, just 76 overall, 58 passing. I don't really want to drill into the individual stats. I want to talk about him as an overall package and what he brings to Brighton. Brighton have one of the most underrated squads in the league. They have so many good young stars that Van Hecke is almost forgotten. Nobody really talks about him. And when £200 million worth of players arrive in the summer, particularly in those forward areas, it's easy to see why. But people forget he was nominated for Brighton's Player of the Season award last year and has just been capped by the Dutch national team. This is a player of extreme calibre that Brighton paid just £2 million for. It's a classic Brighton deal. £2 million, he comes in, he is the best centre-back at the club. He partners Lewis Dunk and forms a formidable backline, but it's not just his defensive capability that is so impressive. Last year, he was astonishing on the ball in that Roberto De Zerbi system, and that has continued under Fabian Hürzeler. Top 10% of European centre-backs for passes, pass completion, progressive passes. Last season, he was amongst the highest players in the entire Premier League for carries and carry distance. And at just 24 years old, he's only going to go from strength to strength. There is a massive move in his future. Partnering him, I wanted to go for a left-sided centre-back. I didn't want to cheat and put a right-sided centre-back on the left. So I'm going to go for Nottingham Forest star Murillo. Overall, he's been given a 78, but I feel like it's quite hard to quantify Murillo's ability in these statistics. 67 dribbling is too low because he constantly drives the ball into the midfield. He's in the top 2% of European centre-backs for successful take-ons. The amount of times this guy drives the ball into midfield, takes on pressure, finds an outlet is astonishing. And that is a key component to how Nottingham Forest have been so solid defensively. Last season, they were 5th by expected goals conceded. That is astonishing. Murillo is a huge part of that, and it's easy to see why so many top European clubs were interested in him in the summer. He's still only 22 years old as well. I think people forget that, and he was signed for just 12 million euros from Corinthians. He, of course, took home the Forest Player of the Year award, beating the likes of Morgan Gibbs-White, Chris Wood, Anthony Elanga, Callum Hudson-Odoi to that. He's an astonishingly good player, and I think 78 is underrated. At left back, this is one of the easier shouts for me. Doesn't get nearly enough plaudits. I was tempted to go for Leif Davis, but instead, I've gone for Anthony Robinson. Again, as you can see, 79 overall. We talk all the time, don't we, about his pace, 88 pace. So let's not just go into his pace. He is an extremely athletic player, but he's also an amazing defender. So I think 74 defending is slightly underrated, given he put up the most interceptions of any player in the Premier League last season. If you combine that with tackles, the only player that put up more tackle and interceptions than him last season was Joao Palhinha. Add to that the fact he got 6 assists as well, and you can start to see a picture developing of a really good all-round fullback who's got an amazing physical profile, reads the game brilliantly, and can provide in attack. I think a lot of clubs are going to look at Anthony Robinson. Yes, he might be 27 years old, but if he has another underrated season like he did last year at Fulham, he's going to throw himself into the spotlight for a big move. Into the central midfield area, I was tempted, but I've spoken about endlessly on my shows. Timo Redbunum. So also tempted by Mateo Kovacic. Amazing start to the season, playing in that number 6 role. Carlos Baleba, Joel Linton. But no, I want to talk about Youri Tielemans. I think since Amadou Onana's moved to Aston Villa, a lot has been made of his impact on the side. But it actually has been Youri Tielemans that's impressed me the most. Yes, he might be an 81 overall with 44 pace, but I feel like last season was a bit of a bedding in period for him at Villa. This season, it feels like he's finally found a home alongside Onana. 2 Belgians in the midfield working perfectly in tandem. With Douglas Luiz hoovering up an awful lot of minutes in that Villa midfield last season, I feel like Tielemans has really taken on the mantle. At the start of this season, he provides great opportunities with his creative numbers, but also does the dog work really well. He's excellent under pressure, sprays the ball around, and is a leader. You know, he's a captain of the Belgian national team in the past. He's been a captain of Leicester. I think he's actually... Nobody really speaks about Tielemans as being one of the better central midfielders in the league anymore, do they? Partnering him is a player that I think is kind of underrated by the wider footballing community. This season has really started to punch through that narrative because of his new role in the Liverpool 6, and that is Ryan Gravenberch. Overall, he's just a 78, and as you can see, no stats kind of pop off the page, do they? But since leaving Ajax, he's struggled to find a home in the team. You look at his starts, it was just 3 in his first season at Bayern Munich, just 12 in the Premier League last season at Liverpool. Now, since Arne Slot has come to the team, he started all 3 games in that new role in front of the back 4. And ever since that failed high-profile Martin Zubimendi pursuit, I think people were asking the question, what are Liverpool going to do? Is Endo going to play in there? Is McAllister going to have to play deeper? They found the solution, and he looks unbelievable. He's in the top 10% of players for progressive carries, take-ons, blocks. He also provides in the final third with high expected goals numbers. If you haven't already seen his pass for the Dutch national team, I suggest you go and check it out. He is so fun to watch, and he's only 22. If he continues on the path he's currently on, he could be one of the key players for Liverpool now, and nobody was saying that 2 months ago. So while Liverpool fans probably don't underrate him, I feel like the wider footballing community will have changed narratives massively by the end of the season. The final midfielder I want to talk about is Pape Sarr. As you can see, he doesn't have a single stat over 80. And when we think about Tottenham's midfield, we think about, Maddison's brilliance, Bissouma's ball-winning ability, Bentancur's class. But rarely, if we're honest, does Pape Sarr get a mention. Which is totally bizarre, isn't it? Because he's still only 21 years old. He joined from Metz in 2022, and last season was an absolute breakthrough campaign for him. He started 27 games, and I think his connection with Ange Postecoglou really shone through. For me, he was their outstanding midfielder last season. James Maddison went off like a rocket, struggled towards the back end of the season. I think you can say the same about Yves Bissouma. Bentancur had injury problems. The one constant, the one consistent was Sarr. And with huge pressure numbers, off-the-ball work rate, progressive pass numbers, interception numbers, he offers the ability to play in multiple different roles. He's only going to go from strength to strength. The fact he's still only 21 years old shocks me. He's not talked about as being one of the best young players in the Premier League when he absolutely should be. There's not many other 21-year-old midfielders in the whole of Europe that are doing what he's doing. So therefore, you have to categorise him as being underrated. Let's talk about the right wing options, because I was really tempted to go for Antoine Semenyo. I think Minter as well will prove to be underrated come the end of the season. A lot of my brain was taken up by Mohamed Kudus, but I kind of feel like he's no longer underrated. He just is one of the best wingers in the league. So instead, I'm going to go for a man who still doesn't breach that conversation. It's Bryan Mbeumo. Now, with 84 pace, 80 shooting, and an 80 overall, he's probably going to be picked up quite frequently. But I still don't think that tells the story of his versatility at Brentford. Being able to play anywhere across the front line basically saved them last year with Ivan Toney's injury. Now, he's never put up double figures of Premier League goals. I think that will change this year. He's gone 9 and 9. I expect him to get into double figures this campaign. But even when you look away from the goals, he is a creative machine. He's in the top 10% of European forwards for expected assists, the top 10% for progressive carries, take-ons, passes, blocks. This guy is an all-round beast, and he's still only 25. And when you add those creative numbers to the goal-scoring numbers, across the last 5 seasons, he's averaging 17 goal involvements per campaign. That's really impressive. His contract runs out in 2026. I think if he performs well for Brentford this summer, he'll go from being an underrated Brentford star to being a player that big clubs are looking at, being a European starter. On the left wing, we have some of the obvious names, Matoma, Trossard, but a player that's really come to the fore this season. He joined Aston Villa in January. We have to mention him. It's Morgan Rogers. Now, as you can see, he is absolutely underrated. Just a 75 overall. But what he provides to this Aston Villa side in his ball carrying ability and his progression is scary. Still only 22 years old, I think you can look to that performance where he dismantled Thomas Partey and Declan Rice from a more central role as being a standout so far in this Premier League season. I expect him to go to new levels. He is crushing it for the England under-21 side, scoring whenever he wants. And that output is really a key to his game. It was 8 goal involvements in just 14 starts at Borough before he got that January move to Aston Villa. Then it was 4 in 8 starts last season in half a campaign in the Premier League. Already, he looks like he's going to contribute massively to this Aston Villa attack and midfield effort. He's working with one of the best coaches in the league in Unai Emery. And I feel like before the Arsenal performance, certain football fans, the casual football fans, were like, I don't even know who Morgan Rogers is. They couldn't even pick him out of a lineup. By the end of the season, he will be one of the stars of that Aston Villa side. Up top, there were loads of names available. I was really tempted by Chris Wood. Consistent goal scorer at Nottingham Forest. Before that, at Burnley. I was also tempted by Nicholas Jackson, to be honest with you. He gets slandered. Yeah, his goal scoring numbers and output are pretty solid. But instead, I'm going to go with João Pedro. Overall, as you can see, just a 77. That doesn't tell the story of his importance to this Brighton side. Last season, people won't realise this, but he scored 20 goals in 40 games for the club. Yes, a lot of those were penalties in the continental competition, but his link-up play, his tenacity, his physicality provides so much to that Brighton forward line. His work with Danny Welbeck is just beautiful. And at 22, he has an incredibly high ceiling. So as you can see, that was my 11 of underrated Premier League players to watch this season. Don't forget, EA Sports FC25 is available to pre-order right now. You can do so by clicking the link at the top of my description. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, hit subscribe. We'll see you later.